Once we begin the study of functions, one couple of vocabulary words that we'll use are something that's called the domain and range. So once we are able to draw a function, we usually like to know the domain and range of them. So at the end of this lesson, you'll be able to find the domain and range of a function or a relationship. So let's go ahead and just find out what domain and range are. Okay, the domain is just the collection of all input values. And if we're given a table, it's just going to be all of those x values. If we're given a story problem or if we're looking at a graph, we might ask ourselves the question, what numbers make sense for our inputs? And then the range is the collection of all output values. And so that's generally, if we have a table, it's just going to be the y values. And we're going to look at what numbers make sense for our outputs. All right, so what we're going to do for an example, it says to find the domain and range in examples 1, 2, 3, and then 6, 7, 8. So please find 1, 2, and 3 from above in your other notes, and we can write some things right underneath it or right off to the side or something to make sure that we get it. So if I'm looking at the domain, if I'm given a table, it's just a listing of all of the x values. So if I list the x values for this one, it's just going to be 0, 1, 3, and 4, and that's it. All right. If I look at the range is just a listing of all the output values or the y values. So if I list those, it will be just 3, 1, 5, 6. And now it's up to you. If you'd like to put those in order, we could. So we could list it as 1, 3, 5, 6 as well. Your choice. All right, let's take a look at example 2 then. My domain is just again going to be a listing of all the x values. So 0, 2, 3, 5. And then the range is just going to be a listing of all the y values. Please notice that when I do this, even though it says 3727, I'm only going to list 372 because I already listed 7 and I don't need to list it again. And again, if we wanted to put this in order, we could. I'll leave that up to you. Right, at this point in time, I would like you to pause the video, please, and I'd like you to find the domain and range of number 3 and then come back and see how you did. All right, the domain in number 3 is just a listing of all the x values. So I have 1, 3, 4, and then I'm not going to list the 3 again. And then for my range, it's just a listing of all the y values, which will be 7, 8, 9, and 10, and that's all there is to it. All right, how do you find the domain and range when you're given graphs? So the domain, it's going to be just a little bit different. We're still looking at x values. So basically what I want to do is I'm going to draw some lines, just vertical lines, that the farthest over that this graph goes is this vertical line. We'll try to draw it straighter. And the farthest to the right this graph goes is this vertical line. And so I've basically just given myself a range of values here for my domain. So the smallest the x value was -2. And then the biggest the x value was 2. So the domain of this would go from -2 to 2. So that's how we would list the domain on that one. And then the range, what we'll do, we're going to be looking at the y value. So I'm going to make a dotted line this time. So the lowest this graph goes, and then the highest this graph goes. Okay, so the lowest the graph went was down to -2. And then the highest this graph went up to is that line that I just drew. I actually think it was up at 6 and I just didn't draw it quite. So my range would be -2 to 6. So that would be that. All right. If you would like to, I would suggest on this one going ahead and pausing the video and trying the domain and range on this one. Draw your lines if you need to, and then come back and see how you did. Alrighty, for the domain on this one, I'm going to be looking at those x values. So I'm going to draw a vertical line to the farthest to the left the graph goes, and a vertical line to the farthest to the right the whole graph goes. Notice the graph doesn't extend beyond those sections. So the furthest to the left it goes is 0, and the furthest to the right that it goes is 3. So that would be my domain. And then my range, the furthest down that it goes, and the furthest up that graph goes, and we'll just go to the line. We'll assume that it goes up there. So the furthest down it goes would be -2, and the furthest up it goes, it doesn't go past 5. So that would be the range. All right, this last one, we're actually back to a list on this one because it's not a line or anything anymore. We have just disconnected dots. So what I'd suggest on this one let's actually make an XY table and then we can easily list the domain and range. So this first point, I'm going to just deal with this one right here. It's over to the left 1, 2, 3, 4, and up 1. So this is going to be negative 4, 1. The second point is going to be, this one point right here is going to be stay put and then go up 3, so 0, 3. This next point is to the right 2 and then down 2, so 2, negative 2. And then that last point is going to be over 4, up 5, so over 4, up 5. Right? So now that you have a table, we can easily list the domain and range. The domain is going to be negative 4, 0, 2, and 4. And the range will be 1, 3, negative 2, and 5. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully now you can find the domain and range of a relationship.